Welcome back, everybody. Video 2 on the 7 PRC. And if you haven't seen the first video or you're not familiar with the rifle, this is a Mossberg Patriot Predator in 7 PRC, a 24-inch barrel with an 8 twist. Had to do a little work to it. I ended up throwing a muzzle brake on it, adjusted the trigger a bit, rebedded the Picatinny rail, and I inletted the stock channel. Just thought I'd throw this in there so you know what we're working on. Today we're going to be doing some prep and loading. We're going to change things up a little bit from the last video. We are going to continue to shoot some of these Berger Elite Hunter 195 grains. I really like what they did in a couple of the loadings last video. We're going to add to it some Hammer bullets here. We've got Hammer Hunter tipped bullets in 162 and the Hammer Hunter tipped in 170 grain. The powders that we're going to work with today, Vihtavuori N565, Hodgdon H1000, and Ramshot LRT. I have some N570 on the way, and if it gets here within the next day or so, I may actually add that to our mix. The only problem we have is I only bought sample packs of these bullets. There are 15 of each. So I'm going to have to figure out which bullets I'm going to use for what and which ones I'm going to try to shoot groups with. The 195s we got a bunch of, so we're going to continue to shoot up the scale for velocity in the powders that we've already tried. Here you got 50 pieces of 7 PRC brass, actually 3 of them set aside. Those are going to be for sighters because I pushed the shoulder back too far when I was setting up my sizing die. These have been deprimed, cleaned, and annealed. And I should mention that I did go through and check primer pockets and flash holes for uniformity, and I spent maybe an hour on that and maybe removed 1/1000th of a grain of brass in the whole thing. So these were really consistent right out of the gate. I measured them pre-firing and post-firing, and for whatever reason, I'm getting the same shoulder height, same headspace measurement. Very odd. But as it is, all of these rounds, all these casings will chamber in that rifle with zero resistance. They're not touching, but I'm going to bump them about 1,000. So we're going to come down from 1.8860 to about 1.885 to 8855. Somewhere right in there is where I'm set to. So we're going to chunk through a few of them and see what we get here. Little dwell time. Like 1.885. Real happy with that. I'll get these all sized up. I forgot to mention that the bushing that is in here for the neck, this is a Type S match die set. So there is a bushing in this die. 0.310 is what I'm squeezing these necks down to. All right, now that we're all sized, we got our shoulders bumped back, going to go ahead and use the mandrel to set the necks out to 282. So now, I should have done it twice because that's my habit. 0.282 inside diameter now. Because our bullet is exactly 284, that's going to give us 2 thousandths interference or holding force. That's the number I like for this cartridge so far. We'll see if that changes. All right, going to trim all these now to 2.270. It's pretty short, and to get uniformity, I've got a couple of them in here that are close to that. So I'd rather stick with 2.270 and have uniformity than strive for a longer number and then have different lots of different lengths. So here we go to do some trimming. So I'll go ahead and trim the rest of these up. Okay, with all these full length sized, trimmed to length, deburred and chamfered, cleaned out with alcohol. So they're sitting there dry. We're going to go ahead and prime these. This time we're going to prime them with CCI Br-2 large rifle primers. On to loading. All right, first thing we're going to load is the 195 grain Berger EOL with LRT. Okay, moving on to seating some hammer bullets here. Haven't discussed these much. These are a copper monolithic. Really nice bullets. These ones you install the tips yourself, which is interesting. They give you a little tipping block and you use a small mallet. Works real good. Hammer Hunter tipped 170 grain. It's got a really deep cavity. It would be like an open tip match looking bullet if it weren't for the tip being placed in it. Opens up really well. These have interesting patented rendition on drive bands. You'll see drive bands and other monolithics. They have sharp edges. These ones are called PDRs, parabolic drag reducing bands. They're all radius. You don't accept or take as much drag as a result of those. Great feature. They can be a little more finicky to seat at times, depending on how much interference or neck tension you have. In the case of this 2000s that we're working with here, I have no doubts we'll be just fine. So I want to be 2.665 at the longest, 2.665. This is with LRT. .665. That puts me 20 thousandths off. Thinking about adding to that a little bit. Everyone says these like to jump a whole lot. I've never shot them in this caliber, so it'll be interesting to experiment with. I think we'll come down another 5 thousandths. We'll go 2.660. A little bit of difference there. Now the question is, will it make the mag? I think if I went with my first initial measurement, I don't think it would have made the mag. So there's that 2.660. Not sure how much of that you're getting. There's a few thousand there. So we're working with the N565 now. This is like a continuation of the pressure ladder, or whatever you want to call it, pressure velocity test we did last time, only going up a little higher. I don't expect that we'll be able to shoot all of these. That's not the plan. The plan actually is to hit a spot where we actually see some pressure and can say, okay, that's max, and we back down from there. Problem last time was we never got to a reasonable velocity with any of them. This rifle tends to be a little slow. This barrel tends to be slow compared to what other people are experiencing. But as a result, I also got zero pressure sign. So here we're loading N565, technically above what book shows, but I can tell you there's not a ton of data out there yet, particularly on this loading, the 195 in the N565 powder. This powder may end up being a touch fast for this application. I've got some N570 on the way. We'll likely end up giving that a spin for sure. What I do like is the consistency in LRT. And I also like that it's a spherical powder. It meters well. To me, it seems to be a good combo with this heavier bullet. A lot of moving parts here. Got 4 powders, 3 different bullets. A lot of labeling to do. Okay, that's it for 195s with the N565, but now we're going to switch over to the 162 grain. All right, so the 162 is really just a slightly shorter brother of the 170, slightly lower BC, same tip, and the PDRs are very similar, but 8 grains less, slightly different profile in that ogive. So here we're loading the 162 grain HHT or Hammer Hunter tipped with N565, 68.5 grains through 70.5 grains. So we want to run these at cartridge-based ogive of 2.650 or even 648. I'm going to go 2.648. All right, so we've got 2.648. Take a look at it next to 170. It's starting into H1000. We've got just 4 rounds of the 195 to load in this powder. Half grain increments, going up from where we left off last time. Still looking to find that pressure and our highest velocity we're going to earn with it. Then we also have 162 hammers to load with H1000 in a pressure velocity test, 5 rounds, and then the 170s, same deal. Like, I wouldn't say it's a whole bunch of fun doing this kind of testing. For me, I like shooting groups for testing, but in order to even get to the point where you can shoot those groups, you've got to figure out where your velocity and pressure's at. It's going to be interesting to see where we end up. I don't care what someone's data says or a book says about this amount of powder. Pressure is pressure, and it shows itself. You get a stiff bolt, you start to see that cratered primer or a flattened primer, or you start to get that ejector mark and swipe. Well, yeah, you're into the pressure. If you're hitting that pressure and you're way high in velocity, good for you. What I don't want to see happen is I end up well into pressure with poor velocity. Rounding things out with Retumbo, just got 2 3-round loadings for this and then 1 single. Pretty sure we're going to be up against pressure before we even get to the second group of 3. Last video working with Retumbo was just a pressure velocity test and went from 64 grains up to 68.5. Ended up hitting 2,823 feet a second with this 195 grain Berger, but never saw pressure. So we're going up from there to 69, 69.5, and 70. That sounds like dangerous, uncharted territory, but seeing no pressure at 68.5, I can't imagine that 1/2 grain is going to make that dynamite of a difference. So predictions. I don't know. My predictions are we're not shooting every bullet in this box. I can tell you that right now. I think I'm going to end up pulling a lot of these down. So enough yammering. Take them to the range, make them fly straight. Okay, so we're out at the range, target at 100 yards. A couple of things to note. Number 1, the bore on this rifle is in absolute zero clean condition. It is down to bare steel. I clean my rifles diligently every time I shoot. However, in the case where you're going to be firing solid copper monolithic bullets, you must make sure that bore is absolutely scrubbed of any copper fouling left behind from jacketing of lead core bullets. So as a result, you cannot fire your lead core 195 grain Berger EOLs first because you'll foul the rifling and then you'll have a hard time with accuracy with your solid coppers. So what I'm going to do is fire all of the Hammer Hunter tipped bullets first, and then we'll move on to the Berger 195s and all the different powders. Another thing to note here is that the 162 grain HHT, which I shot with N565, which was the first 5 rounds of this test in the solid copper monos, was not on paper. I had to figure out where they were hitting, so I gathered their velocity data, but you're not going to see any group size data. I'm just going to blow through those and put the data up on the screen. That's it. Just wanted to catch up. Well, back on the bench. And man, you want to talk about sneaking up on pressure. I was tiptoeing so bad, it was like I was low crawling. So there's one missing from the box because I deep primed one. And then I thought, no, I should photograph the whole thing. Anyhow, there is one piece of brass in this box that actually didn't have any pressure signs on it, but I did have a slightly sticky bolt. I mean, barely. And that was the final load of H1000 with the Hammer Hunter 170 grain. At 70.5 grains of H1000, I hit 3,152 feet a second, and that one was probably right there at max. I could feel just a little difference in the bolt. That was the only round out of all of these all day. Absolutely crazy. I would have bet my next paycheck that there is no way we're going to fire all 50 of these rounds. Just wasn't going to happen. Well, aside from not hitting any dangerous pressure, let's talk about what went right today. Looking at this target here, the Berger 195 with Retumbo. This was the second load of the Retumbo with the 195 Berger, 69.5 grains. We shot a 0.41-ish group. And I say ish because the shot marker image doesn't line up with the actual physical target. So we'll say inside a half inch either way. 2,856 feet a second, SD of 5.7, ES of 13.9. That's a good group. I like that load. It's still too slow. I'd like to see that at 2,900 or over, but it's a good representative sample of what Retumbo is capable of behind this bullet in this barrel. The other one to the right, LRT, that was the hottest load that we shot with LRT in the Berger 195. 76.4 grains of LRT gave us a 0.35 inch group there. Pretty hot rod. 3.4 and 8.7 for SD and ES and 2,912 feet a second. I like that one a lot. That one's like final value. That's a load that we could go ahead and continue to replicate and go hunt with. That one's good to go. A surprising one was the H1000, as we were still conducting pressure testing above where we left off last time. And we had 4 different loads there, 67 through 68.5 grains. We started down at 2,808 feet per second, ended up at 2,875. The goofy thing about that is it's 4 shots there in a 0.65 inch group. That's pretty awesome considering that they're spread out by that much. Okay, so we'll go through each of these loadings and targets one at a time. This first one here is the Hammer HHT 162 grain with the H1000. We did shoot the 162 HHT with N565, but we didn't have it on paper. So you already saw that data earlier, and that's all there is. Here we had 69 grains through 71 grains at half grain increments, started out at 3,012 feet a second, ended up at 3,126. Never saw any pressure. And my feeling is we're really slow. This bullet can go a lot faster, and we're going to explore it in the next video for certain. Next load here is the Hammer HHT 170 grain with LRT, 75.5 grains through 77.5 grains, real stiff load. Started out 2967 and ended up at 3127, still under what I would consider max for this one. I think you can go faster, but you're really running out of powder capacity. And you look at how those bullets flew, not real hot. On the Hammer HHT 170 with H1000, 68.5 grains through 70.5 grains, started out at 3069 and ended at 3152. And this is where we got our slightly heavy bolt just on that last round. I like that velocity, but I think we're going to go faster with the 162, so I may not continue with those 170s. Back to our Berger 195s, we did some pressure testing here in N565, just 67 grains through 68.5 in half grain increments. We started out low at 2767, ended up at 2816. There's still room to move here, but I just don't think we need to explore it knowing that what we've got with LRT. On to the Berger 195 with LRT, 75.5 grains, gave us 2,851 feet a second, SD at 9.1, ES at 22, and a 0.47 inch group to start out. Next one here, Berger 195 grain with the LRT, 75.8 grains, gave us 2,883 feet a second, SD at 32 and ES at 72. Crazy numbers, had one really fast shot. The other two were closer together, a 1.08 inch group. The Berger 195 grain with LRT, 76.1 grains, gave us 2,911 feet a second. Again, SD at 35.2, ES of 80. Another single round that was much hotter than the other two, a 1.73 inch group. Final loading for Berger 195 with the LRT, 76.4 grains, gave us 2,912 feet a second, SD at 3.4, ES at 8.7, a 0.35 inch group, and it is sexy. That's what I wanted to see. I consider this a ready-to-go load. It would only need replication and test again to make sure that it gives us the same results. Berger 195 grain with the Retumbo, 69 grains of Retumbo gave us 2,827 feet per second, SD of 4.6, ES of 10.1, a 0.75 inch group, totally vertical and in a straight line. Here's the better loading with the Berger 195 with Retumbo, 69.5 grains, gave us 2,856 feet a second, SD of 5.7, ES of 13.9, and a 0.41-ish group. It's not really, it's probably slightly bigger than that, but the shot marker, it was so windy, the shot marker was getting pushed around, and I could see where it made that difference in the way it plotted that group. Any way it goes, that one's almost ready to hunt. It's just slightly too slow. This next one's just a single round. It was where I thought we'd be well over pressure. Berger 195 grain with Retumbo, 70 grains, gave us 2,886 and no pressure. It went into that same group as the last group of rounds with Retumbo. So I know I can load Retumbo hotter, and I think I'm going to, just to see where we get to with that one, if we can catch up to where LRT was. This last target here is a group shot with The Berger 195 and H1000, 67 grains through 68.5 and half grain increments, a low of 2808 and a high of 2875, and they tucked into a 0.65 inch group, though we weren't trying to shoot a group with it. We were just checking for velocity and pressure. There is still room for H1000. We can go up from there, but it's real close. We only need to come up about 25, 30 feet a second, and I'm happy. I think that if you can get to 2900 to 2920 in that 195 out of this cartridge, you're doing real good. That's a pretty heavy bullet. All in all, I'd say we had a good day. I like that we developed a final load, at least one, in LRT. I think we're on the doorstep of another with Retumbo in the 195 grain bullet. We're on the doorstep of another with H1000 with the 195 grain bullet. It comes down to these Hammer Hunter tipped bullets, the 162 and the 170. And I think at this point, I'm going to abandon the 170 grain and I'm going to stick to 162 because I want to eke out the little extra velocity that I can. So I've ordered a box of 162 grain Hammer HHTs, and we're going to test it with probably everything. N565, H1000, which we already have, and we'll go up from where we left off. We probably will not attempt it with LRT because that's a slower powder and it's a lighter bullet. We will check it in Retumbo, probably Ramshot Grand, and maybe Ramshot Magnum. Can't think if there's any others there that I would test it in immediately. But anyhow, in the next video, there's going to be a big concentration on the 162 grain HHT by Hammer. I really would like to make that the moose bullet for a whole bunch of reasons. And one of them is speed equals penetration on a monolithic bullet. And you just can't beat what that bullet will be capable of if we can make it shoot fast and group tight. So that's the hope for next time. Next video, it'll be all about the 162 HHT and finishing up with the 195 Berger. If you shoot a 7mm PRC or you load for one, I hope you liked this video. I hope you took something away from it. There's going to be a whole bunch more in this series. Catch you in the next video. Until then, take care and shoot straight.